on AM 560, The Answer.
Now, from the Signature Bank Studios. If you're looking for the latest news, insight into what it means, and the sharpest opinion, there's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. So here's where the West is and why there is a populist revolt from the right happening in Western Europe. I think Germany is about 10 minutes ahead of us. 20-year-old woman in Hamburg has been sent to prison after making a quote-unquote hateful remark, or hateful remarks, plural, towards a migrant who was involved in the gang rape of a child. She is one of 140 people being investigated by Hamburg police for making harmful comments towards convicted child rapists. I understand Germany doesn't have our First Amendment protections, but it's a cultural point more so than a legal one here.
And what about the person, the felon who did it?
Just to provide the context here, this took place in 2020. Multiple groups of migrant men attacked a 14-year-old girl in a park over the course of a night. Park had become a hangout spot for youth during the COVID-19 lockdown. Some of you probably remember this story. The girl had been there drinking with her friend. She's 14, but became scattered after police swept the park and broke up groups to enforce social distancing, of course.
Of course.
Everybody get in your idiot circle.
Dan, if it saves one life.
The men took turns on the girl, repeatedly raping her over an extended period of time. She was disoriented from the first attack. Then she was assaulted a second time by two more men. Her assailants had begun inviting other men to rape her via their chat groups.
I don't know if I can stomach this.
She was attacked a third time by a single man, then a fourth time by three more men.
Okay.
She managed to break away. Eventually, she came across people who recognized her state and called police. 11 men were charged with rape. 2 were acquitted due to lack of DNA evidence. The sperm of 9 men was successfully recovered from the girl's body. So there were 9 ultimately convicted. One of the convicted child rapists had their information posted on WhatsApp. They identified a name and phone number. So this 20-year-old woman from Hamburg, oh, by the way, bearing the lead here, 8 of them got probation.
The 8 illegals?
8 of the 9 men who raped this girl got probation. The 9th was sentenced to 2 years and 9 months in prison. 8 walked. They're convicted rapists. Probation.
Gross.
So now that one of them is identified online, their contact information. So this 20-year-old woman messaged the number through WhatsApp, calling the convicted rapist a dishonorable rapist pig, and the fact that he got probation a disgusting miscarriage. Aren't you ashamed when you look in the mirror? She was arrested for making hateful remarks. She will serve a weekend in prison for her remarks, meaning that she is going to serve more prison time than 8 of 9 convicted child rapists. That's where the West is, at least in terms of its political power structure, which is why that political power structure is under assault and obviously should be. The rapes and the killings by people in this country illegally because of open border policies, I suggest that will be a central theme, at least of one of the candidates on Thursday night. For more on all of this, we're pleased to be joined again by Daniel Henninger, who's the deputy editor of the Wall Street Journal's editorial page. Dan, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Good to be with you.
I'm a pro-immigration guy, legal immigration guy. I'm all the huddled masses yearning to breathe free, better life, and all that. Fleeing legitimate government oppression and threats on lives. But then there's what Western Europe and the United States has done. And I think it's becoming increasingly clear to increasing majorities of people in the West that this is intolerable.
It's intolerable, and it's intolerable as a matter of political leadership. This began, as you were describing, excuse me, in Europe. It was German Chancellor Angela Merkel who opened the doors like this, and into the rest of Europe as well. And we know from when it was happening 5, 6, 7 years ago that they had no plan whatsoever about integrating these people into European society. And it just produced a complete mess. And now, despite the example of that precedent, Joe Biden has done essentially the same thing during the 3 years of his presidency, simply opening the door on the southern border and allowing people to flow in. There's been no real control over who these people are, what their connections are. And it's very clear that in the last 6 months, what's been coming across the border are mainly young, single men with no connections here in the United States, and obviously many of them criminals because they're committing crimes here in the United States now. That's the consequence of a completely uncontrolled, undisciplined immigration system.
And a graphic reminder again, yesterday in court, Jocelyn Nungary, she was 12 years old. She was lured by these two Venezuelans, a 26-year-old, 21-year-old. Two men came in here illegally, they were gotaways. They lured her to 7-Eleven for candy, and then they lured her underneath a bridge. They took turns raping her and torturing her for 2 hours, and she was found tied up, naked from the waist down. And here's her mom in court yesterday and the DA.
She had such a bright future ahead of her, and I knew she was going to go very far. And, these monsters took that opportunity from her.
As soon as our lab results are back, and if they support a death penalty eligible type of capital murder, then we'll come back and ask for no bond. Our immigration system is broken, and if there was ever a case that reflected that, it's this one.
So how should former President Trump handle this issue during the debate on Thursday?
Well, he's going to obviously criticize Joe Biden's policies. His policies were basically to reverse Trump's. And Trump has said a number of interesting things. One, that is on day one, he's going to commence the biggest deportation process ever seen in the United States. If that means he's going to deport people like this, who it seems are obviously members of criminal gangs coming from Venezuela, Honduras, and Ecuador. Who else would behave in such an extraordinarily violent manner? But Trump has also said recently that he wants to give green cards to immigrants who graduate from U.S. universities if they're not connected to Hamas and the like. So Trump looks like he's developing a fairly nuanced approach to immigration, which is undoubtedly what the American people would like to see. Disciplined enforcement, but openness to the idea of immigration.
It seems to me that he would also be well served by going after the arguments that the left is trying to make in defense of what has transpired for the last 3 years, and talking about incidents like these high-profile, ghastly attacks and murders. You get the response. We saw Michael Steele make it, and others. What's different when a migrant commits a horrible crime versus when an American citizen does? As if there's not an obvious answer to that. But raising the argument they're making in order to pillory it as how nonsensical and out of touch and craven they are, I think would serve him well.
Yeah, I agree with that, because their arguments make no sense, as they make no sense on domestic crime. The idea that they were going to reduce incarceration rates in the United States simply by reducing the quality of the crimes from felonies to misdemeanors. Well, yeah, that worked. There are fewer people in prison. More of them are out on the street, obviously committing crimes. And I think if Trump can connect those dots, it's really going to be difficult for me to see Joe Biden responding to that or much of anything else Thursday night.
You wrote recently about that big Hollywood fete that Biden attended where They raised a bunch of money. He got let off stage by Obama. No, he didn't. That was a cheap fake, a deep fake, a deep cheap fake, whatever it was.
Cheap, yeah.
But the point that you make is that the celebrity attendance to the Democratic Party may not be enough this time. Biden's just not cool enough to generate the, to generate the enthusiasm required from the celebrity set.
No, he's not. And the celebrity set, like him, is trending older. I mean, George Clooney, Julia Roberts, Jack Black, Robert De Niro.
Right.
These people are in their 60s and 70s. And younger Hollywood types are not really stepping forward and speaking on Joe Biden's behalf. And that suggests that among that swath of the liberal, the progressive electorate, say below 35 years old, this president is going to have some big turnout problems. They just are not that enthusiastic about his presidency. In fact, they're extremely critical of it.
And it was so great because of the dichotomy of him, Joe Biden with the Hollywood oldies, and then President Trump at the same time was in Detroit in the black neighborhood sitting down with church members. And do you think that that's going to help attract more black voters?
Well, even more than that too. I mean, later on here, he's hanging out with Kid Rock. He's at UFC events, which I know it's young and it skews white male, but there's energy there and it's more youthful and you've got Cardi B to Snoop Dogg and others that say at least pleasant things about Trump. They're not highly so I mean it's very interesting how he sort of has taken much of that celebrity away from the left in this case.
It's absolutely fascinating what he's doing, making his appeals, whether they're in Detroit, Philadelphia. Remember when he was on trial here in New York, he held a rally in a park in the South Bronx of New York City. And he obviously has tapped into an interest, at the very least, among young black, especially young black males. And I do think it had a lot to do with the success of the Trump economy during the first 2.5 years when real wages were growing, inflation was down, and a lot of these young black kids were getting jobs, making money. And it was a situation that had not happened to them under previous administrations. And Trump is the guy who did it. It's not happening under Biden's presidency, and so they're giving Trump a good hard look. Absolutely fascinating what he's doing.
Well, and the other thing, just to sort of compare and contrast that rally in the South Bronx over the weekend with AOC and the fire marshal there, Jamal Bowman.
Yeah, they couldn't even get 300 people.
Well, not only that, but Jamal Bowman, sort of an honorary member of the Socialist Spice Girls, or the Squad, as they're called. He goes down in that primary to George Latimer. What kind of message does that send about sort of where where Democrats want the Democratic Party to be?
That's a great question. I watched that Jamal Bowman performance, and you have to see it to believe it. The guy was just completely out of control. And if he loses to George Latimer, who is kind of cut from the same cloth as George Schwazi, the other Democrat who won on Long Island about 6 months ago, it would suggest that the Democratic Party would like to move towards the center, at least, and away from the squads typified by Jamal Bowman or AOC, who herself was jumping around on stage like a crazy lady.
Out of their minds. He's a former school teacher who pulled a fire alarm. He could, I guess, always go back to teaching.
Well, it's bad enough when politicians try to be comedians. It's worse when they try to be rock stars.
Yeah, or rap stars. I looked at that and I could not believe that guy was a former high school principal in New York.
Just disgusting. That potty mouth like that on him, I wanted to smack him. There was kids there. Horrible. Daniel
Henninger.
He is almost.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Daniel. Go ahead.
He's almost certainly going to lose today. So it's going to be a significant event.
Dan Henninger, deputy editor for the Wall Street Journal's editorial page. Dan, thanks as always.
Good to talk to you guys.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's what Chicago is talking about. It's Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy on AM 560. The Answer.
Join me, Dennis Prager, on an